How do you get your news? Are you getting the correct news? Are you getting accurate news? Is the news business going to hell in a breadbasket? Some people think it is. I'm concerned. A lot of other people are. And tonight we're going to take a look at news in America and what's happening. Good evening, everyone. I'm Larry Kane, and welcome to Voice of Reason here on the Comcast Network. We have a panel tonight that is not unprecedented, but very good. Paul Gluck, he's an associate professor in the School of Communications at Temple University. Paul is former news director at Channel 3 and Channel 10 in Philadelphia, and was the station manager and vice president of Channel 12. Chris May is the co-anchor of CBS 3 Eyewitness News in Philadelphia. He's the main guy there, a position I once held, and thanks for being one of my successors. It's always great to see you, Chris. Dr. Carl Hausman, a professor of journalism at Rowan University in New Jersey with enormous credentials. He's written many books on media in this country, and we're very happy to have him here. Now, before we talk about this entire program was motivated by an article I saw on the web first about a station in Houston, Texas. This station, a Tribune station, decided anchors away. No more anchors. We're just going to put reporters on the air. And then we started to do some research that is pretty amazing about the way you get the news. Let's take a look at the chart that gives us the overall perspective of news in America. Now, you can't see them, but I'm just going to tell you, for the third consecutive year, only digital and cable news saw audience growth. That's the conclusion from the Pew Project of Journalism. I think this chart is much too small for you to read, but let's take a look at the rest. Cable TV news viewership, and we can do away with the chart, in prime time was up 7%. 7%. Online news sites saw an increase of more than 9%. But get this, the numbers are down for other sources of news. Traditional network news audiences fell 2.5%. Local TV news continues to get really rapid audience decline. I mean, this is amazing in local news, down 6.5% in 2009 alone. The magazine industry is taking a hit, down 5%, 9%. And newspapers saw their print circulations continuing to decline almost 11% last year. And in the midst of all of this is the future of news. And the biggest question to me, Chris May, is what happens if the traditional sources of news go away and we're reliant on our cell phones and iPhones and Blackberries, and we're just getting headlines and those big stories are not reported. For example, in Philadelphia, the story about the courthouse that was supposed to be built and the conflict of interest, the other stories that need that inquisitive nature. We could be in big trouble. We could elect people who have no substance whatsoever because we can't find out anything about them.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about traditional sources of news going away, if that does happen, there is no news. I think everything that's fed to the internet, everything that's fed to your cell phone, it all springs from what are ultimately traditional sources of news. And I think what's so frightening about this whole Houston model, Larry, is that what they're talking about doing is eliminating the human element from the news gathering process. The news is ultimately all about people, people who are out reporting on people's stories, reporting on issues that are affecting people's lives. And if you take these people out of the process, you're left with nothing more than just an infomercial. It's a scary proposition, I think. Another
scary proposition, Paul Gluck, is a world without anchors, which I know as a news director you would have hoped for on certain days.
But I've never had the chance to work with Chris, but for you, yeah.
The truth of the matter is what happens in real life situations. For example, let's take a quick look at November 22nd, midday, 1963. Walter Cronkite at CBS tells America about a truly tragic event.
Here is Ed Holton from CBS News. From Dallas, Texas, a flash, apparently official. President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Never forget that. I'll never forget that. I was in the newsroom in St. Louis, Missouri. I was in radio news at the time. I was the only one in the newsroom, and I looked up and said, Walter Cronkite said he's dead. And I felt that there must be some validity to it because he was saying it, although we still hadn't had it confirmed. The point is that in a situation like this, where the whole country is on the edge of its seats, or in 9/11, or in hurricanes or emergencies, or civil disorder, You need a person to talk.
Well, I think you need, there's sort of three things that have to be at play here, and Chris alluded to it early. One, you need to have a credible presence, someone that you trust, a person to whom you can turn, whether they're in the box or on radio or wherever, that you believe about the circumstance. Next, you need verifiable information. You need, unlike so much that's on the internet that's not vetted, that's not reliable, you need to know that the information this person's delivering to you has been certified, it's been checked, it's been vetted in some way, and I think that that's a huge absence. There is one odd balance here. For many years, the people who ran news radio stations would make the argument that you don't need a particular personality to be a trusted source of news, that the station is the source of news. I think it's different in television. People at CNN may not choose to say it out loud, but right after they talk about it being a news source, they also talk about it being a companionship service. And I think we look for that in television.
Professor Hausman, Dr. Hausman, the situation is rapidly deteriorating. It's not just happening, it's not a gradual progression or deceleration or deflation when it comes to news. Doesn't that concern you in terms of people making judgments eventually?
It frightens me. When we see the amount of information that comes out of context with no connection, no correlation, it might as well be coming from the moon. It might as well be gamma rays. And that's why I agree that the news has to come with a face. I like my news from people. I like my news from Walter Cronkite, from Dan Rather, from Brian Williams, because it's not so much them or I worship them, but I know that they are the face of an organization. They're out there. They will get the blame if it's wrong, and there's a face on it, so they have some credibility and they have some accountability, and I think that accountability is what's missing in the world of the internet, where you can have a Shirley Sherrod video which is turned into a snippet and made into something which clearly it's not. And I looked into a little bit of what's happening at KIH. This is their new.
This is the Texas station.
Yeah, they call it News Fix 21, I think it is. And now they're a Tribune station, and of course they have nothing to lose. Tribune has the financials and maybe the Weimar Republic. So they're attempting. If you don't have to pay anchors, that's probably a pretty good deal from
send that tape down to Texas.
Let me know first. And so yeah, it's an experiment. They're dead last in the market, and what they're going to try to do is, I read a blog which I think is reliable because some people who've worked in the industry put their names on it, but it's going to be like this. They're going to open with an animation with different spots on it in Houston. Then they're going to zoom in on the spots, and there's going to be an animation that gives some facts about it in text. There's going to be a lot of nat sound, natural sound, man on the street interviews, combined with animation, and they did a pilot of it that they were trying to do something about foreign policy, getting tough with Russia, and they had a tape of Dolph Lundgren from Rocky IV. Come on, this is.
I think is kind of interesting too is if you look at these kinds of situations, and we're not just talking about a problem here. We'll try to talk about solutions. Part of the issue at that station, maybe at your station, I'm not going to take shots at any particular station, is that local news has sort of been a self-fulfilling prophecy of its own demise by not, and I'm not talking about 3, 6, 10, 17, 29 in Philadelphia, or 57, or in the case of Comcast, but in local news is really not focused on a lot of the issues that people really care about. For example, urban sprawl. 70% of the audience in the Philadelphia market is suburban. Okay, 29% in the city. Education, which is hotter than hot. So you don't really, what you get is a constant diet of fast-paced news, which I helped invent. Okay, so I'm not